to institute one of the Army's LSD field testing projects had been based, at least in part, on the finding that no long-term residual effects had ever resulted from the drug's administration. The CIA's failure to inform the Army of a death which resulted from the surreptitious administration of LSD to unwitting Americans may well have resulted in the institution of an unnecessary and potentially lethal program. The development, testing, and use of chemical and biological agents by intelligence agencies raises serious questions about the relationship between the intelligence community and foreign governments, other agencies of the federal government, and other institutions and individuals. The questions raised range from the legitimacy of American complicity in actions abroad which violate American and foreign laws to the possible compromise of the integrity of public and private institutions used as a cover by intelligence agencies. Section A. The programs investigated. Subsection 1. Project Chatter. Project Chatter was a Navy program that began in the fall of 1947, responding to reports of, quote, amazing results, end quote, achieved by the Soviets in using, quote, truth drugs, end quote. The program focused on the identification and testing of such drugs for use in interrogations and in the recruitment of agents. The research included laboratory experiments on animals and human subjects involving anabasis aphilia, scopolamine, and mescaline in order to determine their speech-inducing qualities. Overseas experiments were conducted as part of the project. The project expanded substantially during the Korean War and ended shortly after the war in 1953. Subsection 2. Project Bluebird Artichoke. The earliest of CIA's major programs involving the use of chemical and biological agents, Project Bluebird, was approved by the director in 1950. Its objectives were A. Discovering the means of conditioning personnel to prevent unauthorized extraction of information from them by known means. B. Investigating the possibility of control of an individual by application of special interrogation techniques. And C. Memory enhancement. And D. Establishing defensive means for preventing hostile control of agency personnel. Footnote 4. As a result of the interrogations conducted overseas during the project, another goal was added: the evaluation of offensive uses of unconventional interrogation techniques, including hypnosis and drugs. In August 1951, the project was renamed Artichoke. Project Artichoke included in-house experiments on interrogation techniques conducted, quote, under the medical and security controls which would ensure, end of page 70, beginning of page 71, that no damage was done to individuals who volunteered for the experiments, end quote. Footnote 5. Now I'm going to return to page 70 to read the footnote. Footnote 4 says, CIA memorandum to the Select Committee, quote, behavioral drugs and testing, end quote. February 11th, 75. Back to page 71. Overseas interrogations utilizing a combination of sodium pentothal and hypnosis after the physical and psychiatric examinations of the subjects were also part of Artichoke. The Office of Strategic Intelligence, OSI, which studied scientific advances by hostile powers, initially led to Bluebird Artichoke efforts. In 1952, overall responsibility for Artichoke was transferred from OSI to the Inspection and Security Office, I and SO, predecessor to the present Office of Security. The CIA's technical services and medical staffs were to be called upon as needed. OSI would retain liaison function with other government agencies. Footnote 6. The change in leadership from an intelligence unit to the operating unit apparently reflected a change in emphasis from the study of actions by hostile powers to the use, both for offensive and defensive purposes, of special interrogation techniques, primarily hypnosis and truth serums. Representatives from each agency unit involved in Artichoke met almost monthly to discuss their progress. These discussions included the planning of overseas interrogations, footnote 8, as well as further experimentation in the U.S. Information about Project Artichoke after the fall of 1953 is scarce. The CIA maintains that the project ended in 1956, but evidence suggests that Office of Security and Office of Medical Services use of, quote, special interrogation, end quote, techniques continued for several years thereafter. Section 3, Naomi. MK Naomi, MK Naomi was another major CIA program in this area. In 1967, the CIA summarized the purposes of MK Naomi. A. To provide for a covert support base to meet clandestine operational requirements. B. To stockpile severely incapacitating and lethal materials for the specific use of TSD, Technical Services Division. C. To maintain in operational readiness special and unique items for the dissemination of biological and chemical materials. D. To provide for the required surveillance, testing, upgrading, and evaluation of materials and items in order to assure absence of defects and complete predictability of results to be expected under operational conditions. Footnote 9. Under an agreement reached with the Army in 1952, Special Operations Division, SOD, at Fort Detrick was to assist CIA in developing, testing, and maintaining biological agents and delivery. End of page 71, beginning of page 72. Systems. By this agreement, CIA acquired the knowledge, skill, and facilities of the Army to develop biological weapons suited for CIA use. I will return to page 71 to read the footnotes. Footnote 5. Memorandum from Robert Taylor, O/DD/P, to the Assistant Deputy, parentheses, Inspection and Security, and Chief of Medical Staff, March 22nd, 52. Footnote 6. Memorandum from H. Marshall Chadwell, Assistant Director, Scientific Intelligence, to the Deputy Director/Plans, DDP, quote, Project Artichoke, end quote, August 29th, 52. Footnote 8, quote, Progress Report, Project Artichoke, end quote, January 12th, 53. Footnote 9. Memorandum from Chief TSD/Biological Branch to Chief TSD, quote, MK Naomi. Funding, objectives, and accomplishments, end quote. October 18th, 67. Page 1. For fuller description of MK Naomi and the relationship between CIA and OSD, See page 360 FF. Resuming page 72. SOD developed darts coated with biological agents and pills containing several different biological agents, which could remain potent for weeks or months. SOD also developed a special gun for firing darts coated with a chemical which could allow CIA agents to incapacitate a guard dog, enter an installation secretly, and return the guard dog to consciousness when leaving. SOD scientists were unable to develop a similar incapacitant for humans. SOD also physically transferred to the CIA personnel biological agents in quote bulk end quote form and delivery devices, including some containing biological agents. In addition to the CIA's interest in biological weapons for use against humans, it also asked SOD to study use of biological agents against crops and animals. In 1967, memorandum, the CIA stated, 3 methods and systems for carrying out a covert attack against crops and causing severe crop loss have been developed and evaluated under field conditions. This was accomplished in anticipation of a requirement which was later developed but was subsequently scrubbed just prior to putting into action. Footnote 9a. MK Naomi was terminated in 1970. On November 25, 1969, President Nixon announced the use of any form of biological weapons that kill or incapacitate and ordered the disposal of existing stocks of bacteriological weapons. On February 14, 1970, the President clarified the extent of his earlier order and indicated that toxins, chemicals that are not living organisms but are produced by living organisms, were considered biological weapons subject to his previous directive and were to be destroyed. Although instructed to relinquish control of material held for the CIA by SOD, a CIA scientist acquired approximately 11 grams of shellfish toxin from SOD personnel at Fort Detrick, which were stored in a little-used CIA laboratory where it went undetected for 5 years. Footnote 10. Section 4, MKUltra. MKUltra was the principal CIA program involving the research and development of chemical and biological agents. It was, quote, concerned with the research and development of chemical, biological, and radiological materials capable of employment in clandestine operations to control human behavior, end quote. Footnote 11. In January 1973, MKUltra records were destroyed by Technical Services Division personnel acting on the verbal orders of Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, Chief of TSD. Dr. Gottlieb has testified, and former Director Helms has confirmed that in ordering the records destroyed, Dr. Gottlieb was carrying out the verbal order of then DCI Helms. MKUltra began with a proposal from the Assistant Deputy Director for Plans, Richard Helms, to the DCI, outlining a special, end of page 72, beginning of page 73, funding mechanism for highly sensitive CIA research and development projects that studied the use of biological and chemical materials in altering human behavior. I'm going to pause right there and return to page 72 to read the footnotes. Footnote 9a, IBID, page 2. Footnote 10, Senate Select Committee, September 16th, 75. Hearings, Volume 1. Footnote 11, Memorandum from the CIA Inspector General to the Director, July 26, 63. Resuming page 73. The projects involved research to develop a capability in the covert use of biological and chemical materials. This area involves the production of various physiological conditions which could support present or future clandestine operations. Aside from the offensive potential, the development of a comprehensive capability in this field of covert chemical and biological warfare gives us a thorough knowledge of the enemy's theoretical potential, thus enabling us to defend ourselves against a foe who might not be as restrained in the use of these techniques as we are. Footnote 12. MKUltra was approved by the DCI on April 13, 1953, along the lines proposed by ADDP Helms. Part of the rationale for establishing of this special funding mechanism was extreme sensitivity. The Inspector General's survey of MKUltra in 1963 noted the following reasons for this sensitivity. A. Research in the manipulation of human behavior is considered by many authorities in medicine and related fields to be professionally unethical. Therefore, the reputation of the professional participants in the MKUltra program are on occasion in jeopardy. B. Some MKUltra activities raise questions of legality implicit in the original charter. C. A final phase of the testing of MKUltra products places the rights and interests of U.S. citizens in jeopardy. D. Public disclosure of some aspects of MKUltra activity could induce serious adverse reaction in U.S. public opinion, as well as stimulate offensive and defensive action in this field on the part of foreign intelligence services. Footnote 13. Over the 10-year life of the program, many, quote, additional avenues to the control of human behavior, end quote, were designed as appropriate for investigation under MKUltra Charter. These include, quote, radiation, electroshock, various fields of psychology, psychiatry, sociology, and anthropology, graphology, harassment substances, and paramilitary devices and materials, end quote. Footnote 14. The research and development of materials to be used for altering human behavior consisted of 3 phases. First, the search for materials suitable for study. Second, laboratory testing on voluntary human subjects in various types of institutions. Third, the application of MKUltra materials in normal life setting. The search for suitable materials was conducted through standing arrangements with specialists in universities, pharmaceutical houses, hospitals, state and federal institutions, and private research organizations. End of page 73, beginning of page 74. I'm going to jump back to 73 to read the footnotes. Footnote 12. Memorandum from ADDP Helms to DCI Dulles, April 3rd, 53. Tab A, page 1 to 2. Footnote 13. IG Report on MKUltra, 1963. pp. or page 1 to 2. Footnote 14. IBID, page 4. Resuming page 74. The annual grants of funds to these specialists were made under ostensible research foundation auspices, thereby concealing the CIA's interest from the specialist's institution. The next phase of the MKUltra program involved physicians, toxicologists, and other specialists in mental, narcotics, and general hospitals and prisons. Utilizing the products and findings of the basic research phase, they conducted intensive tests on human subjects. One of the first studies was conducted by the National Institute of Mental Health. This study was intended to test various drugs, including hallucinogenics, at the NIMH Addiction Research Center in Lexington, Kentucky. The quote, Lexington Rehabilitation Center, end quote, as it was then called, was a prison for drug addicts serving sentences for drug violations. The test subjects were volunteer prisoners who, after taking a brief physical examination and signing a general consent form, were administered hallucinogenic drugs. As a reward for participation in the program, the addicts were provided with the drug of their addiction. LSD was one of the materials tested in the MKUltra program. The final phase of LSD testing involved surreptitious administration to unwitting non-volunteer subjects in normal life setting under cover officers of the Bureau of Narcotics acting for the CIA. The rationale for such testing was, quote, that testing of materials under accepted scientific procedures fails to disclose the full pattern of reactions and attributions that may occur in operational situations, end quote. Footnote 15. According to the CIA, the advantage of the relationship with the Bureau was that test subjects could be brought and cultivated within the setting of narcotics control. Some subjects have been informers or members of suspect criminal elements from whom the Bureau of Narcotics has obtained results of operational value through the tests. On the other hand, the effectiveness of the substances on individuals at all social levels, high and low, Native American and foreign, is of great significance, and testing has been performed on a variety of individuals within these categories. Emphasis added. Footnote 16. A special procedure designated MK Delta was established to govern the use of MKUltra materials abroad. Such materials were used on a number of occasions because MKUltra records were destroyed. It is impossible to reconstruct the operational use of MKUltra materials by the CIA overseas. It has been determined that the use of these materials abroad began in 1953 and possibly as early as 1950. Drugs were used primarily as an aid to interrogations, but MKUltra/MK Delta materials were also used for harassment, discrediting, or disabling purposes. According to an Inspector General survey of the Technical Services Division of the CIA in 1957, an inspection which did not discover the MKUltra project involving the surreptitious administration of LSD to unwitting, non-volunteer, end of page 74, beginning of page 75. Subjects. The CIA had developed 6 drugs for operational use, and they had been used in 6 different operations on a total of 33 subjects. Footnote 17. By 1963, the number of operations and subjects had increased substantially. I will return to page 74 to read the footnotes. Footnote 15. IBID, page 21. Footnote 16. IBID, pages 11 and 12. Resuming page 75. In the spring of 1963, during a wide-ranging Inspector General survey of the Technical Services Division, a member of the Inspector General's staff, John Vance, learned about MKULTRA and about the project involving their surreptitious administration of LSD to unwitting, non-voluntary human subjects. As a result of the discovery and the Inspector General's subsequent report, this testing was halted and much tighter administrative controls were imposed on the program. According to the CIA, the project was decreased significantly each budget year until its complete termination in the late 1960s. Subsection 5. The testing of LSD by the Army. There were three major phases in the Army's testing of LSD. In the first, LSD was administered to more than 1,000 American soldiers who volunteered to be test subjects in chemical warfare experiments. The second phase, Material Testing Program, EA 1729, 95 volunteers received LSD in the clinical experiments designed to evaluate potential intelligence uses of the drug. In the third phase, Projects Third Chance and Derby Hat, 16 unwitting non-volunteer subjects were interrogated after receiving LSD as part of operational field tests. Section B, CIA drug testing programs. Subsection 1, the rationale for the testing programs. The late 1940s and early 1950s were marked by concern over the threat posed by the activities of the Soviet Union, the People's Republic of China, and other communist bloc countries. The United States' concern over the use of chemical and biological agents by these powers was acute. The belief that hostile powers had used chemical and biological agents in interrogations, brainwashing, and in attacks designed to harass, disable, or kill Allied personnel created considerable pressure for a defensive program to investigate chemical and biological agents so that the intelligence community could understand the mechanisms by which these substances worked and how their effects could be defeated. Footnote 18. Section B, CIA drug testing programs. Subsection 1, the rationale for the testing programs. The late 1940s and early 1950s were marked by concern over the threat posed by the activities of the Soviet Union. One moment. Of particular concern was the drug LSD. The CIA had received reports that the Soviet Union was engaged in intensive efforts to produce LSD, and that the Soviet Union had attempted to purchase the world's supply of the chemical. As one CIA officer who was deeply involved in the work with this drug described the climate of the times, quote, It is awfully hard in this day and age to reproduce how frightening all of this was to us at the time, particularly after the drug scene had become as widespread and as knowledgeable in this country as it did. But we were literally terrified because this was the one material that we, end of page 75, beginning of page 76, had ever been able to locate that really had the potential fantastic possibilities if used wrongly. End quote. Footnote 19. Returning to page 75 to read the footnotes. Footnote 17. IBID 1957, page 201. Footnote 18. Thus, an officer in the Office of Security of the CIA stressed the quote, urgency of the discovery of techniques and method that would permit our personnel, in the event of their capture by the enemy, to resist or defeat enemy interrogation, end quote. Parentheses. Minutes of the Artichoke Conference of October 22nd, 53. End parentheses. Resuming page 76. But the defensive orientation soon became secondary. Chemical and biological agents were to be studied in order to, quote, perfect techniques for the abstraction of information from individuals, whether willing, or mental capacities of individuals, whether willing or not. Excuse me, I skipped a line. Let me start from the beginning. Quote, to perfect techniques for the abstraction of information from individuals, whether willing or not, end quote. And in order to, quote, develop the means for the control of the activities and mental capabilities of individuals, whether willing or not, end quote. Footnote 20. One agency official noted that drugs would be useful in order to, quote, gain control of bodies, whether they were willing or not, end quote. In the process of other programs, the CIA began to develop, produce, stockpile, and maintain in operational readiness materials which could be used to harass, disable, or kill specific targets. Footnote 22. Reports of research and development in the Soviet Union, the People's Republic of China, and the Communist bloc countries provided the basis for the transmutation of American programs from a defensive to an offensive orientation. As the Chief of Medical Staff of the Central Intelligence Agency wrote in 1952, there is ample evidence in the reports of innumerable interrogations that the communists were utilizing drugs, physical duress, electric shock, and possibly hypnosis against their enemies. With such evidence, it is difficult not to keep from becoming rabid about our apparently laxity. We are forced by this mounting evidence to assume a more aggressive role in the development of these techniques, but must be cautious to maintain strict inviolable control because of the havoc that could be wrought by such techniques in unscrupulous hands. Footnote 23. In order to meet the perceived threat to national security, substantial programs for the testing and use of chemical and biological agents, including projects involving the surreptitious administration of LSD to unwitting non-volunteer subjects, quote, at all social levels, high and low, Native American and foreign, end quote, were conceived and implemented. These programs resulted in substantial violations of the rights of individuals within the United States. On to the footnotes of page 76. Footnote 19. Testimony of CIA officer, November 21st, 75, page 33. Footnote 20. Memorandum from the Director of Security to Artichoke, Representatives, subject. Quote, Artichoke, restatement of program, end quote. Footnote 21. Artichoke Memorandum, July 30th, 53. Footnote 22. The Inspector General's report of 1957 on the Technical Services Division noted that, quote, 6 specific products have been developed and are available for operational use. Three of them are discrediting and disabling materials which can be administered unwittingly and permit the exercise of a measure of control over the actions of the subject, end quote. A memorandum for the Chief TSD Biological Branch to the Chief TSD October 18th, 67, described two of the objectives of the CIA's Project MK as, quote, to stockpile severely incapacitating and lethal materials for the specific use of TSD, end quote, and, quote, to maintain in operational readiness special and unique items for the dissemination of biological and chemical materials, end quote. Footnote 23. Memorandum from the Chief of Medical Staff, January 25th, 52. End of page 76, beginning of page 77. Although the CIA recognized these effects of LSD to unwitting individuals within the United States, the project continued. Footnote 24. As Deputy Director for Plans, Richard Helms wrote the Deputy Director of Central Intelligence during discussions which led to the cessation of unwitting testing. While I share your uneasiness and distaste for any program which tends to intrude upon an individual's private and legal prerogatives, I believe it is necessary that the agency maintain a central role in this activity, keep current on enemy capabilities, the manipulation of human behavior, and maintain an offensive capability. Footnote 25. There were no attempts to secure approval for the most controversial aspects of these programs from the executive branch or Congress. The nature and extent of the programs were closely held secrets. Even DCI McCone, was not briefed on all of the details of the program involving the surreptitious administration of LSD until 1963. It was deemed imperative that these programs be concealed from the American people. As the CIA's Inspector General wrote in 1957, precautions must be taken not only to protect operations from exposure to enemy forces, but also to conceal these activities from the American public in general. The knowledge that the agency is engaging in unethical and illicit activities would have serious repercussions in political and diplomatic circles and would be detrimental to the accomplishment of its mission. Footnote 26. Subsection 2. The death of Dr. Frank Olson. The most tragic result of the testing of LSD by the CIA was the death of Dr. Frank Olson, a civilian employee of the Army, who died on November 27, 1953. His death followed his participation in a CIA experiment with LSD. As part of this experimentation, Olson unwittingly received approximately 70 micrograms of LSD in a glass of Cointreau. I don't know how to pronounce that drink. He drank on November 19th, 1953. The drug had been placed in the bottle by a CIA officer, Dr. Robert Lashbrook. As part of an experiment he and Dr. Sidney Gottlieb performed at the meeting of Army and CIA scientists. Shortly after this experiment, Olson exhibited symptoms of paranoia and schizophrenia. Accompanied by Dr. Lashbrook, Olson sought psychiatric assistance in New York City from a physician, Dr. Harold Abrahamson, whose research on LSD had been funded indirectly by the CIA. While in New York for treatment, Olson fell to his death from a 10th-story window in the Statler Hotel. Page 77 footnotes. Footnote 24. Even during the discussions which led to the termination of unwitting testing, the DDP turned down the option of halting such tests within the United States and continued them abroad, despite the fact that the Technical Services Division had conducted numerous operations abroad making use of LSD. The DDP made this decision on the basis of security, noting that the past efforts overseas had resulted in, quote, making an inordinate number of foreign nationals witting of our role in a very sensitive activity, end quote. Memorandum for the Deputy Director of Central Intelligence from the Deputy Director for Plans, December 17th, 63, page 2. Footnote 25, IBID, pages 2 through 3. Footnote 26, IG, Survey of TSD, 1957, page 217. End of page 77. Beginning of page 78. A. Background. Olson, an expert in aerobiology who was assigned to the Special Operations Division, SOD, of the U.S. Army Biological Center at Camp Detrick, Maryland. This division had three primary functions. 1. Assessing the vulnerability of American installations to biological attack. 2. Developing techniques for offensive use of biological weapons. And 3. Biological research for the CIA. Footnote 27. Professionally, Olson was well respected by his colleagues in both the Army and the CIA. Colonel Vincent Rouet, Olson's immediate supervisor at the time of his death, was in almost daily contact with Olson. According to Colonel Rouet, quote, as a professional man, his ability was outstanding, end quote. Footnote 28. Colonel Rouet stated that, quote, during the period prior to the experiment, I noticed nothing which would lead me to believe that he was of unsound mind, end quote. Footnote 29. Dr. Lashbrook, who had monthly contacts with Olson from early 1952 until the time of his death, stated publicly that before Olson received LSD, the time of his death, quote, as far as I know, he was perfectly normal, end quote. Footnote 30. This assessment is in direct contradiction to certain statements evaluating Olson's emotional stability made in CIA internal memoranda written after Olson's death. Section B. The experiment on November 18, 1953. A group of 10 scientists from the CIA and Camp Detrick attended a semi-annual review and analysis conference at a cabin located at Deep Creek Lake, Maryland. 3 of the participants were from the CIA's technical services staff. The Detrick representatives were all from Special Operations Division. According to one CIA official, the Special Operations Division participants, quote, agreed that an unwitting experiment would be desirable, end quote. Footnote 31. This account directly contradicts Vincent Rouet's recollection. Rouet recalls no such discussion and has asserted that he would remember any such discussion because the SOD participants would have strenuously objected to testing on unwitting subjects. Footnote 32. In May 1953, Richard Helms, assistant DDP, held a staff meeting which the Chief of Technical Services staff attended. At this meeting, Helms, quote, indicated that the drug LSD was dynamite and that he should be advised at all times when it was intended to use it, end quote. Footnote 33. In addition, the then DDP, Frank Wisner, sent a memorandum to TSS stating the requirement that the DDP personally approve the use of LSD. Gottlieb went with the experiment. Footnote 34. Securing the approval, end of page 78, beginning of page 79. Approval of his immediate supervisor. Neither the chief of the TSS nor the DDP specifically authorized the experiment in which Dr. Olson participated. Footnote 35. Returning to page 78, reading the footnotes. Footnote 27. Staff summary of Vincent Rouet, interview, August 13th, 75, page 3. Footnote 28. Memorandum of Colonel Vincent Ruet, to whom it may concern, no date, page 2. Footnote 29. Ruet Memorandum, page 3. Footnote 30. Joseph B. Treister, New York Times, July 1975, page 1. Footnote 31. Memorandum for the record from Lyman Kirkpatrick, December 1st, 53, page 1. Footnote 32. Ruet, Staff Summary, August 13th, 75, page 6. Footnote 33. Inspector General Diary, December 2nd, 53. Footnote 34. IBID. Dr. Gottlieb has testified that he does not remember either the meeting with Helms nor the Weissner Memorandum. Gottlieb, October 18th, 75, page 16. Returning to page 79. And I will stop here for this recording. I'll pick back up next time.